The information contained in this podcast is an expression of opinion and does not constitute investment advice. This is the GoldMoney Foundation podcast with Alistair MacLeod, keeping you up to date with expert opinion on precious metals and the markets.
Hello, this is Alistair MacLeod on behalf of the GoldMoney Foundation. And with me, I have Michael Checkan of Asset Strategies, who's come all the way from America to talk at a conference in Zagreb. Michael, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
Can you start off by telling us a little bit about Asset Strategies?
Yes, Asset Strategies is a U.S. corporation established in 1982, and this year will be our 30th anniversary year. We're both a foreign currency and precious metal specialist company. We buy and sell many different currencies, transferring funds from the United States, say, into Canadian dollars or euros or Swiss francs and transferring them abroad. But on our most active area right now is precious metals, and it has been for the last 10 years. And we buy and sell gold, silver, platinum, palladium in coins, bars, and certificates. And we also, by the way, have on our website the Gold Money link, because we think very highly of gold money.
Which is a good opportunity for you to tell us the website link. If you can tell us what your website is, so our listeners can tune in.
Thank you, Alistair. It's www.assetstrategiesruntogether.com. It's ASSETSTRATEGIES.com.
Lovely, that's brilliant. Now, we were talking earlier, and I was fascinated with some of your stories about doing cross-border deals for, sort of Vietnamese refugees and so on.
Correct.
I mean, that's a very interesting background. How did you get involved with that?
Well, I worked for 16 years for a gentleman named Nicholas Deek. And Mr. Deek had a worldwide organization called Deek Pereira, and it was the largest precious metals foreign currency company in the United States. Also, he had banks in Europe, being Focal Bank in Geneva and Zurich, and in Vienna it was Bankhaus Deek. And also there were offices in Asia. So as a result of this international network, which was at the time the largest precious metals company and foreign currency company in the world, I was able to learn basically about the different avenues of transferring funds and also dealing in precious metals.
Oh, right. And but the story about the refugees, I thought, was very instructive of how Vietnamese refugees either arrived in the camps in America with gold and silver or dollars, in which, or even checks drawn on banks in foreign currencies, in which case they were all right, compared with the people who brought out Vietnamese currency. I can't remember what it was at the time, which of course was worthless.
Yeah, this is a very good point, and it's really a lesson with regard to gold. As we both know, gold is the only real money. Everything else is fiat money. But in 1975, when I had the opportunity to assist the refugees when I worked for Deek Pereira, I worked out of a camp in Florida, in the panhandle of Florida, called Eglin Air Force Base. And the people that were coming out were coming out, as you can just imagine, as Vietnam was falling. So the piastres they brought out, I had to tell them were worthless, because it was only as strong as the country, and the country had fallen. However, others had brought out with them gold, and it came in actually two forms. One would be in a typical way it's traded in Asia, which is even going on to this day, which is in the form of taels. That's TAELS. And the taels were 37.5 grams or 1.2 ounces. So what we did was we had a translator, and we took their taels in, put it on a scale, and we also did some acid testing to see that it was gold. And then we would pay them out at the market price. At that time, the price of gold was running between $150 to $175. And also they came out with jewelry, because it's quite customary in Asia to wear your wealth. And they would come out with what amounted to 22-karat gold jewelry. And we, in turn, would put that on a scale, do a quick acid test, and then buy that and pay them out in either cash or in the form of travel checks.
Right, so that was one of these rare occasions, I mean, thankfully rare occasions, when it's money of last resort, as it were, really became extremely useful. Now, you've you still have Asian connections in the sense that you were speaking today, amongst other things, about gold and silver in Asia. Is that a market you're still very, you follow very closely? I mean, you mentioned Hong Kong. What is your involvement in that part of the world?
Well, it's my view that the wealth of the world is being transferred from the west to the east.
Yes.
So I think we have to look at Asia. And when you look at Asia and you look at gold, there are two prominent countries that are most known for this. One is India, which is kind of historical and traditional. It was at one time the biggest importer of gold. It still is one of the biggest importers of gold. And the other one is China. And China, of course, over the last maybe 20, 25 years has been growing at a very accelerated pace. They've had double-digit GDP growth. Of the 1.3 billion people, 300 million people have had some success in gathering wealth. And they don't have a lot of alternative investments in China. So people in first line go to real estate. But that becomes very expensive, and they now go and look at gold as a way of not necessarily making an investment, but in first line to actually use it as insurance, wealth insurance. And it's not just for an individual, it's for a family. Because that's the way they are. It's a family unit that they work through. And so we, a good friend of mine opened up an office in Shanghai. This was 2 years ago. Previous 2 years, he had opened one in Hong Kong. And what I'm hoping to do at some point is to work with him to develop some business, mutual business. He has a much larger company than I do, and I think by working together, I think we may be able to assist some of the Chinese with regard to their look for wealth preservation and investment.
Does this tie in at all with the new silver contract, which I think is due to start in Shanghai fairly soon? That presumably is going to be an interesting market as far as you're concerned.
Yes, actually, there is a company that I'm aware of that just opened up an office. This is an American company that went into a joint relationship with the Chinese in Shanghai, and they are basically it's a refinery and mint, and they will be supplying that market. At the present time in China, there is not a lot of interest in silver. When I talk about China, I'm talking about mainland China. However, in Hong Kong, on my last trip there, which was just last year, and I go over about every year or every 2 years, I noticed that there was a lot of dealing in silver, where in the past it was primarily gold. And I think with the price of gold going up as it has from 2001 of $250 an ounce to as high as $1,930 an ounce, it has taken the small buyer out of the market. So now they're looking for what is viewed as the alternative to gold, which is silver, or as we sometimes call it, the poor man's gold.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, and I think this was very much the experience in America too, when gold was running up. I think people like Eric Sprott were telling us that they were finding this, that money for money, there was as much money going into silver as there was gold, implying that the then ratio, which was about 40 to 1, people were buying about 40 ounces of silver to 1 of gold. Hasn't done us a lot of good in the short term. But do you find that when you get consolidations in the market like this, that your buyers or your customers, whether they're buyers or sellers, get sort of worried about it, or are they really in there for the long term?
Well, our particular clientele, and I'm talking primarily about a U.S.-based clientele, they are not traders. They are buy and hold people. They're looking for the long term, and typically they buy gold specifically as a percentage of their portfolio. Oftentimes, 5% of their investable portfolio as an insurance, and that's against chaos. It's their golden anchor. And then what they do, depending on what the market is doing and what their comfort level is, they will buy gold, silver, platinum, and some even palladium. Platinum and palladium they view as a bit more risky than they see as gold, for example. And so they're long-time buyers and holders of the metal. At the present time in the United States, I can tell you since last October, the market is typically driven by either fear or greed. And right now, fear is predominant out there, and it just doesn't affect the precious metals market. It affects all of the financial services. And what's happening with regard to precious metals specifically is people are holding off on making purchases. So we're sitting with a certain amount of cash with people who are waiting for the market to come to a point where they would like to buy. Now, this to me, I don't believe in market timing. I believe in dollar cost averaging in and out of markets. But again, it's what the client wishes. So this uncertainty that's out there, which has basically paralyzed and frozen the buyer of precious metals and other types of financial investments, I think will abate only later on this year. When things become more certain. And that I'm looking for is the fall of this year, September through December. I think we'll have a change in the market. And instead of having this trading range, I think we'll have some movement up. And I think it could be significant.
Well, I think that's interesting, because really what you're saying is that if there are more people in the market like you, there are people with clients who are building up an overhang of money ready to go into the market. But I mean, if we're just concentrating on gold rather than silver, it seems to me that the Chinese are not exporting any gold. The Chinese government, I don't know if they're in the market buying gold, but certainly the Chinese public are in there, as you've alluded. And I think we're almost at the point where they're overtaking the Indians in terms of demand. The Indian government have just removed this idea of a tax on gold. They've given that idea up after a lot of pressure from the market. There is about, on an annual basis, something like 2,700 tons being produced. China's probably, I mean, if you take out the Chinese production, the Russian production, and so on and so forth, you cut that back to what? A bit under 2,000 tons, I should think. I don't know, I'm just guessing. Then you've only got 2,000 tons. And it seems to me that between India and China, that's more or less spoken for, isn't it? So where's, apart from central banks maybe trying to depress the price, whether that's true or not, we don't know, where do you see the stock coming from?
Well, first with regard to India, just a comment about that. Asians buy against weakness in markets, and Westerners, particularly Americans, buy against strength.
We panic.
We panic. We've missed a boat. So, but
it's an Anglo-Saxon attribute.
There you go. And what's happening in India right now is that the rupee has gotten a lot weaker. So it means that the gold price for Indians
has gone up.
Has gone up in value. So that's affecting the physical supply of metal on the market. China is quite interesting because, unlike the United States, they encourage their citizens to buy gold. In the United States, I wouldn't say the U.S. government discourages it, but they don't talk about it. And when you look at the mainstream press, they always write negative articles about gold. They don't recognize that gold is actually money and that it's an asset class. Well, in China, they want their citizens to buy gold. And in fact, the gold that they are producing, and they're the number one producer of gold in the world now, is going to the government. And with regard to their holdings, what they're trying to do is, since they're sitting on so many dollars at this point, they're trying to reduce the amount of dollars that they have. And they're doing that in a number of ways. One, they're diversifying into different currencies. So they basically have a basket of currencies that they're buying. And two, what they're doing is they're doing outreach throughout the world, and particularly in developing countries, where they're coming in and trying to lock down resources. So they're not only looking to lock down petroleum, obviously, but because there is not a lot of petroleum in China, but they're also trying to lock down natural resources such as copper, and also, of course, gold. They're active in Latin America as well. So but as we both know, it takes a long time to get a mine to operate, at least 5 years. And what's happening now is the amount of gold coming out of the mines has been diminishing because these mines are being worked down.
Well, the grades are falling all the time.
And the grades are falling all the time. So, and of course, the expenses are going up.
Yes.
That's the other side, because the energy is going up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And you also have contacts into the gold market in China at the government level. Do you get any feeling from that in terms of demand for, I mean, particularly, sort of, if you like, the government, how the government is promoting gold in China? It seems to me that they are definitely promoting it, as you said just now. But tell us a little bit about, is it China Gold, your contacts there, and
yes,
and what you have gleaned from them?
Yeah, China Gold is the leading seller of gold in China. This is there's a Chinese like to buy gold that is part of the lunar series. For example, this is the year of the dragon, and so they like to buy gold medallions with which they wear and as a decoration. But it's also they're buying it really for the intrinsic value, not for a piece of jewelry. They sell different types of gold. The most popular, I would say, for people of wealth there would be the kilo bars. And you have to remember that this dynamic, as I mentioned earlier, has affected 300 million people in some way, but only a very few have really taken advantage of it and become millionaires. I think there's more millionaires per year coming out of China than there is anywhere else in the world.
Yes, indeed.
But what also is happening is that a lot of these Chinese, through relationships, have gotten their money out of the country through Hong Kong. And there is a gold path that goes from Hong Kong into China. So it goes, gold is not coming out of China, more gold is coming into China through Hong Kong. So this is a market that I think is still embryonic. I mean, 15 years ago, you wouldn't be able to buy gold. The government controlled it, and now they're making it open to the general public, and they're encouraging people to be capitalists and free market people. And in fact, I sometimes think that they're better capitalists than the Americans are. Because we're getting more regulation, we're getting more controls on our ability to do business. And as a small businessman, this takes its toll. And it should be recognized that the small business person in the United States is the one who's basically creating jobs. And yet these are the people that are under attack with not only regulation but also taxes.
Yes, that's right, and that's certainly true, I think, also all around Europe. I mean, I sometimes feel that France hasn't got a small business bit, except for sole traders, literally, because, the cost of employing people, the regulations and all the rest of it, basically means you've got to be very, very big and have the legal departments and the HR departments and the profit margins to absorb it, or you're just basically a farmer selling off a market stall.
And I understand from a friend who has been in France for some time with a company that they actually have police that go around to check if somebody's working more than 40 hours, because what they view is that if you're working more than 40 hours, you're taking a job away from somebody else,
It's a bit
which
naive.
Of course is mad. It's
Yes, I like your comparison between the America, the Americans, if you like, and the Chinese. I mean, I do feel that if either an American or a European knocks on your door, he's going to tell you what he thinks. Whereas if a Chinaman knocks on your door, he's going to ask, can we trade?
Right, exactly.
It's a totally different attitude, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly is.
Now, Michael, you're in Europe and you're doing a bit of a grand tour. You flew from Vienna to Zagreb, and I think you're going on to Georgia, aren't you?
I'm going on to Tbilisi for 3 days. I was approached by a bank there that wanted to know more about precious metals, and I met one of their representatives in Washington, D.C., and he's invited me to visit with him. And that's just a tip. If you invite me to go somewhere in the world, I will probably go, so just keep that in mind in the future. And then from there, I go on to Istanbul, and I've been invited by a refinery there to see their operation. They're becoming active in the United States, where they're actually buying gold in the form of scrap and having it sent back to Istanbul, where they're making it into a product that they are selling not only in the Middle East, but would like to sell in Eastern Europe and also in the United States.
Well, Turkey is very, very interesting because that's become, the central bank there has tried to persuade its citizens to put gold in and sort of issue gold certificates against it, which of course everybody gets very suspicious about. But also I think it's become a gateway of gold transactions into Iran, and so it's very much a center for gold, isn't it? And that's interesting.
Yeah, two things come to mind. I was in Istanbul about 15 years ago with an investment group, and I visited the stock exchange, which just opened up. And this was a very large stock exchange, not for just one country, but it was, as it turned out when I asked, it was actually for the region. And what they saw and what they envisioned was that there was a lot of natural resource wealth that's going to be coming out of that area, as I call it. This is the Chaostan area, and that money had to go somewhere, and so they viewed that they would be able to take some of that money and it would go into their stock exchange. With regard to Turkey in general, I mean, they have, I think, about 80 million people there. This is, in my view, they are going to be the power in the Islamic world. They have the people and the resources, and they're growing at about 8% GDP growth per year. On the gold side, I'm going to be taken down into this company's shop, which is in the Grand Bazaar, and they still do business the old world way, where it's a handshake, means that you've got a done deal. And I will be taken into the gold area where they're buying and selling gold on a regular basis. Still, in this part of the world, the main way they hold gold is not in the form of bars or coins, but it's in the form of jewelry. So jewelry is very popular. But I understand, and I have to check this out, and one of the things I'll be doing is looking at this. I've been told that there is a scheme in Turkey at the present time where if you take your jewelry or other types of gold and have it melted down and put into bars, that you will get this credit and you will in a bank, and you will be able to get interest on that money. And I think this is a wonderful way of making a real money asset with some return on the investment as well. And I would assume that at some point the banks would also enable you to make loans against that, even very conservative loans, so that, again, gold becomes much more flexible than it has been in the past.
Absolutely. Well, Michael, thank you very much indeed for taking time to tell us about all these different parts of the world. It's very nice to speak to someone who's got the experience that you have. And good luck on your trip to Tbilisi.
I look forward to it, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Subscribe to the Gold Money newsletter at www.goldmoney.com to receive email updates on new articles, videos, and iTunes podcasts from our Gold Research section.
Opportunity for you to tell us the website link. If you can tell us what your website is, so that our listeners can tune in.
Thank you, Alistair. It's www.assetstrategiesruntogether.com. It's ASSETSTRATEGIES.com.
Lovely. That's brilliant. Now, we were talking earlier, and I was fascinated with some of your stories about doing cross-border deals for, sort of Vietnamese revenue.
We buy and sell many different currencies, transferring funds from the United States, say, into Canadian dollars or euros or Swiss francs and transferring them abroad. But on our most active area right now is precious metals, and it has been for the last 10 years. And we buy and sell gold, silver, platinum, palladium in coins, bars, and certificates. And we also, by the way, have on our website the Gold Money link, because we think very highly of gold money.
Which is a good opportunity.
The information contained in this podcast is an expression of opinion and does not constitute investment advice. This is the Gold Money Foundation podcast with Alistair MacLeod, keeping you up to date with expert opinion on precious metals and the markets.
Hello, this is Alistair MacLeod on behalf of the Gold Money Foundation. And with me I have Michael Checkan of Asset Strategies, who's come all the way from America to talk at a conference in Zagreb. Michael, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here.
Can you start off by telling us a little bit about Asset Strategies?
Yes, Asset Strategies is a U.S. corporation established in 1982, and this year will be our 30th anniversary year. We're both a foreign currency and precious metal specialist company.
Refugees and so on.
Correct.
I mean, that's a very interesting background. How did you get involved with that?
Well, I worked for 16 years for a gentleman named Nicholas Deek. And Mr. Deek had a worldwide organization called Deek Pereira, and it was the largest precious metals foreign currency company in the United States. Also, he had banks in Europe, being Focal Bank in Geneva and Zurich, and in Vienna, it was Bankhaus Deek.